Captain Maria Santos had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates played with dolls, she built model helicopters from scratch. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of Apache attack helicopters, their sleek black bodies bristling with missiles and cannons. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, would find her at age 8 studying military aviation books that most adults couldn't understand. "Daddy, why don't women fly the big war helicopters?" she asked one evening, pointing at an Apache gunship photo. Her father paused, setting down his coffee. "Well, sweetheart, the military says women aren't strong enough for combat roles." "That's stupid," Maria replied with the blunt honesty only children possess. "Helicopters don't care if you're a boy or girl. They care if you can fly them." Growing up in the 1980s and early 1990s, Maria faced constant reminders that her dreams were considered impossible. High school guidance counselors steered her toward nursing or teaching. Her own mother worried that military service would make her too masculine to find a husband. But Maria's determination only grew stronger with each obstacle. She spent summers working at her uncle's aircraft maintenance shop, learning every bolt and wire of helicopter mechanics. While other teenagers partied, Maria studied flight manuals and practiced on civilian helicopter simulators. She could recite the technical specifications of an AH-64 Apache from memory before she ever sat in one. The Apache was America's premier attack helicopter, designed to hunt and destroy enemy tanks. Its twin engines could push it to 182 miles per hour. The 30mm chain gun could tear through armored vehicles like paper. Hellfire missiles could strike targets miles away with pinpoint accuracy. It was a flying fortress, and Maria wanted to master every aspect of its deadly capabilities. When she turned 18, Maria marched into the Army recruitment office with a folder full of perfect test scores and recommendations from every flight instructor she'd ever met. The recruiter, Sergeant Johnson, looked skeptical as he flipped through her paperwork. "Look, sweetheart, you've got impressive grades, but combat aviation isn't for everyone. Have you considered being a transport pilot instead? Much safer, and the Army needs good transport pilots too." Maria's jaw tightened. "Sergeant, I didn't spend 4 years preparing to fly cargo planes. I want to fly Apaches. The Apache program is extremely demanding," he continued, clearly trying to discourage her. "The washout rate is over 60%, even for men. The physical requirements alone, let me worry about meeting the requirements," Maria interrupted. "Just tell me how to apply." Basic training was Maria's first real test. The drill sergeants seemed determined to prove that women couldn't handle military stress. They gave her extra duties, longer runs, and constant verbal abuse designed to break her spirit. But Maria had been preparing for this her entire life. While other recruits complained and quit, she excelled. During weapons training, Maria consistently outshot most of the men in her unit. Her small frame actually helped with marksmanship. Less body mass meant less weapon sway. When they practiced helicopter recognition, she could identify aircraft types from distances that left instructors amazed. "Santos," barked Drill Sergeant Martinez after one particularly impressive shooting session. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me, Drill Sergeant. He said if I was going to join the Army, I'd better be able to hit what I aimed at." The physical training proved challenging, but not impossible. Maria worked twice as hard as anyone else to meet the strength requirements. She couldn't match the men's raw power, but she excelled in endurance, flexibility, and hand-eye coordination. What she lacked in brute force, she made up for with technique and determination. Flight school was where Maria truly began to shine. The complex coordination required for helicopter flight seemed to come naturally to her. While other students struggled with the mental multitasking of flying, navigation, and communication, Maria handled it effortlessly. Her first instructor, Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, was initially skeptical about training a woman for combat aviation. But after just 3 flights, his attitude completely changed. "Santos, I've been teaching helicopter pilots for 15 years, he told her after a particularly smooth landing. "You have some of the best natural instincts I've ever seen. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong here." The academic portions of flight school played to Maria's strengths. She had already memorized most of the technical information years before arriving. While other students spent late nights cramming, Maria helped tutor struggling classmates. She understood not just how helicopter systems worked, but why they were designed that way. Advanced combat training introduced Maria to actual Apache helicopters for the first time. Sitting in the gunner's seat of the H-64, surrounded by targeting displays and weapon controls, she felt like she had finally found her home. The helicopter's systems seemed like extensions of her own body. Her gunnery scores were exceptional from the beginning. The Apache's targeting system required pilots to coordinate eye movements, hand controls, and computer inputs simultaneously. Many experienced pilots struggled with this complex interface, but Maria adapted almost immediately. During one training exercise, she successfully engaged 12 simulated targets in under 3 minutes, a score that impressed even the most experienced instructors. Her precision was remarkable. Every shot hit exactly where she intended, with no wasted ammunition. But it was during night flying that Maria truly proved her exceptional abilities. Night combat requires pilots to fly using thermal imaging and computer displays while coordinating attacks with ground forces. The sensory overload overwhelms many pilots, but Maria thrived in these conditions. It's like playing the world's most complex video game, she explained to a fellow student who was struggling with night operations. You just have to trust the instruments and stay calm. Her final flight school evaluation report contained words rarely seen in military assessments. Exceptional pilot with extraordinary potential for combat operations. Recommend immediate assignment to frontline Apache unit. When graduation day arrived, Maria stood with pride as she received her wings. She had not only completed the program, but had finished in the top 5% of her class. The same instructors who had initially doubted her abilities now spoke of her as one of the most promising pilots they had ever trained. But Maria knew that earning her wings was just the beginning. Real combat would be the ultimate test, and she was about to face challenges that would push her skills to the absolute limit. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were intensifying, and Apache pilots were in desperate demand. As she prepared for her first deployment, Maria could hear the whispers from some of her male colleagues. They questioned whether a woman could handle the stress of actual combat. Some openly stated that they didn't want to fly missions with a female pilot, claiming it would compromise unit effectiveness. Maria let their doubts fuel her determination. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Every hour of study, every training flight, every obstacle she had overcome had led to this opportunity. She was ready to prove that gender meant nothing when it came to piloting one of the world's most sophisticated weapon systems. Her deployment orders arrived on a cold February morning. 1st Battalion, 1st Aviation Regiment, stationed at Forward Operating Base Thunder in Iraq. It was one of the most active combat zones in the entire theater, where Apache crews flew multiple missions daily against insurgent forces. Maria packed her gear with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. Her personal items fit into a single duffel bag. The most important things she carried were her flight manuals, targeting references, and a photo of her father in his Vietnam-era flight suit. As she boarded the transport plane that would take her to war, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every person who had told her that women couldn't be combat pilots, every obstacle that had been placed in her path, every moment of doubt she had overcome, all of it had led to this moment. She was about to become one of the first women to fly Apache helicopters in active combat. The pressure was enormous, not just to succeed, but to prove that other women deserve the same opportunities. Maria understood that her performance would be scrutinized far more intensely than any male pilot's. But she was ready. The girl who had dreamed of flying death machines was about to get her chance to prove that dreams, combined with skill and determination, could overcome any barrier. The real test was about to begin, and Maria Santos was going to show the world what she was capable of achieving. #Welcome to Hell Forward Operating Base Thunder lived up to its name. The constant sound of helicopters, artillery, and distant explosions created a symphony of war that never stopped. Maria stepped off the transport aircraft into the Iraqi heat, her boots crunching on the gravel runway. The temperature hit her like opening an oven door, 128 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity that made every breath feel like swimming through soup. The base was a sprawling collection of concrete barriers, tents, and prefabricated buildings surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. Apache helicopters sat in reinforced hangars, their black hulls scarred by combat operations. Maintenance crews worked around the clock, keeping the aircraft mission-ready. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell commanded the Apache squadron, and his reputation preceded him. A 20-year veteran with 3 combat deployments, he had earned respect through aggressive tactics and an uncompromising attitude toward excellence. When Maria reported to his office, she could feel his skeptical gaze evaluating every detail of her appearance. "Captain Santos," he said, not offering her a seat. "I've read your training records. Impressive scores. But this isn't flight school anymore. Out here, mistakes get people killed." "Yes, sir, I understand." "Do you?" Mitchell walked around his desk, standing close enough that Maria could see the combat patches covering his uniform. "I've got 12 Apache crews under my command. These men have been flying together for years. They trust each other completely. Now I'm supposed to integrate a female pilot into that brotherhood." Maria kept her expression neutral, though anger burned in her chest. "Sir, my gender doesn't affect my ability to operate the aircraft or complete missions." "We'll see about that." Mitchell's voice carried clear doubt. "You'll be partnered with Chief Warrant Officer Derek Hayes. He's my most experienced pilot, and he's not thrilled about babysitting a rookie, especially a female rookie." Hayes proved to be everything Mitchell had implied, a skilled but arrogant pilot who made his resentment clear from their first meeting. Tall and broad-shouldered, with prematurely gray hair and cold blue eyes, he looked at Maria like she was a problem he had to solve rather than a partner. "Listen carefully, Santos," he said during their first briefing. "I've been flying Apaches for 8 years. I've completed over 300 combat missions without losing a single soldier under my protection. I don't intend to break that record because they stuck me with an untested female pilot. I don't intend to break your record either," Maria replied calmly. "I just want to do my job." Hayes snorted. "Your job is to follow my lead, stay quiet on the radio unless absolutely necessary, and try not to get us both killed. Can you handle that?" Their first mission came 3 days later. Intelligence reported insurgent activity in a village 30 miles north of the base. Ground forces had requested air support for a search operation that might encounter heavy resistance. It was exactly the kind of mission that could turn deadly in seconds. Maria spent the pre-flight briefing studying maps and intelligence reports while Hayes outlined his tactical approach. She noticed several potential problems with his plan, but decided to wait and see how the mission developed before offering suggestions. Hayes had made it clear that he wanted her to stay quiet. The Apache they flew was a marvel of military engineering. The AH-64D longbow carried a sophisticated radar system, thermal imaging cameras, and enough firepower to destroy an entire armored battalion. The cockpit was cramped but efficiently designed, with every control and display positioned for maximum effectiveness. Maria sat in the front gunner's seat, responsible for operating the weapons systems and target acquisition. Hayes occupied the pilot's seat behind her, controlling the aircraft's flight path and overall mission coordination. Communication between the 2 crew members was critical for mission success. As they lifted off from the base, Maria felt the familiar rush of helicopter flight. The Apache responded to Hayes's controls with precision, climbing smoothly into the desert sky. Below them, the Iraqi landscape stretched endlessly, brown dirt, scattered buildings, and roads that looked like ribbons from altitude. "Radio check." Hayes's voice came through her helmet intercom. Loud and clear, Maria responded, running through her weapons systems checklist. Everything showed green on her displays. The flight to the target area took 25 minutes, during which Hayes maintained strict radio silence, except for essential navigation updates. Maria used the time to study the terrain through her targeting cameras, identifying potential hiding spots and escape routes that insurgents might use. As they approached the village, the ground commander's voice crackled through their radio. Apache 2 to 7. This is Blackhawk 6. We're taking sporadic small arms fire from multiple buildings. Request immediate support. Hayes keyed his microphone. Blackhawk 6, Apache 2 to 7. We have your position visual. Moving to Overwatch position now. Through her targeting system, Maria could see American soldiers moving carefully through the village streets. Muzzle flashes from several buildings indicated enemy positions, but the insurgents were using civilians as human shields. Any attack would require surgical precision to avoid civilian casualties. I count at least 6 enemy positions, Maria reported over the intercom. 2 in the mosque, 3 in residential buildings, 1 in what looks like a shop. I see them, Hayes replied curtly. Maintain target lock on the mosque position. Maria adjusted her targeting system, placing the crosshairs precisely on the window where muzzle flashes indicated an enemy fighter. But something bothered her about the tactical situation. The insurgent position seemed too obvious, too exposed. In her training, she had learned that experienced fighters rarely made such basic mistakes. Hayes, I think this might be a setup, she said carefully. The enemy positions are too exposed. They might be trying to draw our attention while preparing an ambush. Just maintain your targeting, Santos. I'll handle the tactical analysis. Before Maria could respond, her threat warning system erupted in alarms. Multiple surface-to-air missiles were tracking their aircraft from concealed positions around the village perimeter. The insurgents had indeed prepared an ambush, using the obvious fighters as bait to lure the Apache into a kill zone. Missile einbund, Maria shouted. Breaking right. Hayes yanked the aircraft into a violent evasive maneuver, but Maria could see that 2 of the missiles were still tracking them. The Apache's defensive systems began deploying flares and chaff, but the missiles were too close and too well positioned. We're going to take a hit, Hayes said grimly. Maria's mind raced through their options in the seconds before impact. Standard procedure called for immediate withdrawal to avoid further damage, but the ground forces below were now trapped in a deadly crossfire. Without air support, the soldiers would be overwhelmed by the insurgent ambush. Hayes, we can't leave those soldiers, she said urgently. We don't have a choice. We're going to be lucky to make it back to base ourselves. The first missile struck their tail rotor assembly with a thunderous explosion. The Apache immediately began spinning out of control as Hayes fought to maintain flight. Warning alarms filled the cockpit as multiple systems failed simultaneously. Tail rotor is gone, Hayes reported, his voice tight with concentration. We're going down. Through her targeting camera, Maria could see the ground forces being overrun by insurgent fighters emerging from previously hidden positions. American soldiers were pinned down in a deadly crossfire with no escape routes. Without immediate intervention, they would all be killed or captured. Hayes, I still have weapons control, Maria said. Give me 30 seconds before you put us down. Are you insane? We're barely maintaining control as it is. Those soldiers are going to die if we don't help them right now. Hayes cursed, but Maria was already swiveling the Apache's 30mm cannon toward the insurgent positions. Fighting through the aircraft's violent spinning, she began engaging targets with desperate precision. Her rounds tore through enemy fighters who had emerged from concealment, buying the ground forces precious seconds to reorganize their defense. The second missile impacted their main rotor assembly, and Hayes lost all remaining control authority. The Apache began falling toward the desert floor in what pilots called an auto-rotation, a controlled crash that might be survivable if executed perfectly. Brace for impact, Hayes shouted. Maria continued firing until the last possible second, destroying 2 more enemy positions before the Apache struck the ground with bone-jarring force. The aircraft's armored cockpit protected them from the worst of the impact, but Maria felt her ribs crack against her harness straps. Smoke and dust filled the air around their crashed helicopter. Through her damaged targeting system, Maria could see insurgent fighters moving toward their position. The Apaches' weapons were still functional, and she had a clear responsibility to defend the aircraft until rescue arrived. "Hayes, are you injured?" she called out. "Banged up, but operational," he replied. "Nice shooting back there. You probably saved those soldiers' lives." It was the first genuine compliment he had given her, and it came at the moment when their own lives hung in the balance. The Apache's radio was damaged, but Maria could hear distant helicopter rotor noise that indicated rescue forces were responding to their situation. "We just have to hold this position until help arrives," she said, training the cannon on approaching insurgent fighters. "Santos," Hayes said quietly, "about what I said earlier. You're a better pilot than most men I've flown with. If we get out of this, I want you to know that." Maria smiled grimly as she engaged another group of enemy fighters moving toward their position. "We're going to get out of this, and then I'm going to show you what I can really do." The rescue helicopters arrived 15 minutes later, their guns blazing as they suppressed the insurgent forces long enough for a recovery team to extract Maria and Hayes from their damaged aircraft. As they lifted off toward the safety of the base, Maria looked down at the Apache they were leaving behind. It had been her first combat mission, and she had proven herself under the worst possible circumstances. But she knew that this was just the beginning. Hayes had started to respect her abilities, but the rest of the squadron still saw her as an unproven female pilot who had gotten lucky. Maria was determined to change their minds. She had skills that could save lives and win battles, but first she had to survive long enough to demonstrate them. The war was far from over, and her biggest challenges still lay ahead. Proving ground 3 weeks after the crash, Maria returned to flight status with a new aircraft and a reputation that had begun to shift among the squadron pilots. Hayes had filed a report praising her performance under fire, but many still viewed her first mission as beginner's luck. She was determined to prove them wrong. The morning briefing on September 15th carried an air of unusual tension. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell stood before a map dotted with red enemy position markers, his expression grim as he outlined the day's mission. "Intelligence has identified a major insurgent weapons cache 15 kilometers southeast of our position," he began. "They're moving advanced anti-aircraft systems and heavy weapons through this area to support attacks on our supply convoys. This isn't the usual small arms and improvised explosives we've been dealing with." Maria studied the tactical display, noting the complex terrain around the target area. The weapons cache was positioned in a valley surrounded by ridgelines that provided excellent defensive positions for enemy forces. Any aircraft approaching the target would be exposed to fire from multiple directions. The cache includes Russian-made surface-to-air missile systems and possibly Iranian-supplied anti-tank missiles. Mitchell continued. "Ground forces can't reach the position without taking heavy casualties, so this is strictly an air operation." Hayes raised his hand. "Sir, what's our intelligence on enemy strength in the area?" "Estimated 40 to 60 fighters with professional military training. These aren't local insurgents. They're foreign fighters with experience using advanced weapon systems." Maria felt her pulse quicken. This would be the most dangerous mission the squadron had attempted since her arrival. The enemy possessed weapons specifically designed to destroy helicopters, and they would be expecting an air attack. "Flight assignments," Mitchell announced. "Apache 2 to 1 and 2 to 3 will provide perimeter security. Apache 2 to 7 will conduct the primary attack on the weapons cache." Maria realized that Apache 2 to 7 was her aircraft. She and Hayes would be leading the most dangerous part of the mission, flying directly into the teeth of enemy air defenses to destroy the weapons cache. After the briefing, Hayes pulled Maria aside. "Santos, I won't lie to you. This mission is going to test everything we've learned about flying together. The enemy knows we're coming, and they got the weapons to knock us down." "What's our approach plan?" Maria asked, already running tactical scenarios in her mind. "Low and fast through the Eastern Canyon, pop up for target acquisition, engage with maximum firepower, and get out before they can coordinate their surface-to-air response." Maria nodded, but she had already identified potential problems with the standard approach. "Hayes, What if we come in from the northwest instead? The terrain provides better cover, and the sun angle would work in our favor. Hayes paused, considering her suggestion. Over the past 3 weeks, he had learned to respect her tactical insights. Walk me through your thinking. Maria spread the mission map on a nearby table, pointing out specific terrain features. The eastern approach puts us in a narrow canyon with limited escape routes. If they have missiles positioned on these ridgelines, we'd be trapped. But if we come from the northwest, we can use this wadi system for cover and have multiple escape routes if things go wrong. The northwest approach is longer and requires more fuel, Hayes pointed out. But it's also unexpected. They're probably concentrating their air defenses along the eastern approaches because that's what conventional tactics would dictate. Hayes studied the map for several minutes, tracing flight paths with his finger. Finally, he looked up at Maria with genuine respect in his eyes. Your plan is better than mine. We'll go northwest. 2 hours later, they were airborne in the pre-dawn darkness, flying barely 50 feet above the desert floor to avoid enemy radar detection. The Apaches' engines whispered through the cool morning air as they approached the target area, using Maria's suggested route. Target area in sight, Maria reported, adjusting her thermal imaging cameras to penetrate the darkness. I count multiple vehicles and what looks like a camouflaged bunker system. Through her targeting display, she could see dozens of insurgent fighters moving around the weapons cache. Heavy trucks were parked near partially concealed missile launchers, and Maria could identify several advanced anti-aircraft systems that pose serious threats to coalition aircraft. Confirmed weapons cache, Hayes replied. Beginning attack run. The Apache rose from its concealed approach, popping up over the ridgeline like a deadly black ghost. Maria's fingers flew over her weapons controls, designating targets with practiced precision. The first Hellfire missile streaked away toward a surface-to-air missile launcher, followed immediately by a second missile targeting an ammunition truck. Both missiles found their marks with devastating accuracy. The SAM launcher disappeared in a ball of orange flame, while the ammunition truck exploded with secondary detonations that shook the ground for miles around. But Maria was already engaging the next targets, her 30mm cannon tearing through enemy positions with surgical precision. Multiple missile launches, Hayes shouted as enemy air defense systems began returning fire. Maria's threat warning system screamed as at least 6 surface-to-air missiles rose from concealed positions around the valley. These weren't the crude, improvised weapons they usually faced. These were sophisticated, radar-guided missiles designed specifically for killing helicopters. Chaff and flares deployed, Maria reported, her voice calm despite the mortal danger. Continuing attack on primary targets. Hayes threw the Apache into violent evasive maneuvers, while Maria maintained her attack on the weapons cache. Her training had taught her that the best defense against enemy missiles was often to destroy their launchers before they could fire additional rounds. A missile detonated close enough to rattle the Apache's armored hull, but Maria's targeting remained steady. She systematically destroyed 3 more enemy positions, while Hayes flew an intricate pattern designed to defeat the incoming missiles. Santos, we need to get out of here, Hayes called out as more missiles rose from the valley floor. 30 more seconds, Maria replied, engaging a cluster of enemy fighters who were trying to evacuate with portable missile launchers. I can stop them from escaping with those weapons. Her cannon fire swept through the enemy position with deadly accuracy. Insurgent fighters fell under her precise shooting while their weapons exploded in secondary fires. In those 30 seconds, Maria prevented dozens of advanced weapons from reaching other enemy units. Time to go. Hayes yanked the Apache into a sharp turn toward their escape route. But as they departed the target area, Maria spotted something that made her blood run cold. A group of American soldiers was pinned down in a small outpost 3 miles from the weapons cache, surrounded by insurgent fighters who were using the chaos of the air attack to launch their own assault. Hayes, we got friendlies under attack at grid 2847, she called out, already swiveling her targeting camera toward the new threat. Our mission is complete, Santos. We need to return to base for fuel and rearming. Those soldiers won't last long enough for another aircraft to reach them. Maria could see through her thermal imaging that the American position was being overrun. Enemy fighters were advancing from multiple directions, while the soldiers fought desperately to hold their defensive positions. Without immediate air support, they would be killed or captured within minutes. Hayes cursed, but turned the Apache toward the embattled outpost. "You've got whatever ammunition is left. Make it count." Maria's remaining weapons were limited. Fewer than 200 rounds of 30mm ammunition and no missiles. Against dozens of enemy fighters, she would have to make every shot perfect. Engaging enemy positions north of friendly location, she reported, opening fire on insurgent fighters advancing toward the American position. Her cannon fire was devastatingly accurate. Each burst found its target, dropping enemy fighters who thought they were safely concealed behind rocks and buildings. Maria's years of training and natural shooting ability combined into a display of marksmanship that left even Hayes amazed. "Incredible shooting, Santos," he said as Maria eliminated another group of enemy fighters. "Just get me close enough to finish this," she replied, already identifying the next targets. Within 5 minutes, Maria had systematically destroyed every enemy position threatening the American outpost. Her precision shooting had turned a potential disaster into a complete victory, saving the lives of 12 soldiers who would have otherwise been overwhelmed. As they finally turned toward home, Hayes's voice came over the intercom with genuine admiration. "Santos, I've never seen shooting like that. You just saved those soldiers' lives with some of the most accurate fire I've ever witnessed." "That's what we're here for," Maria replied simply. When they landed at Forward Operating Base Thunder, a crowd had gathered around their aircraft. Word of Maria's performance had spread throughout the base, and pilots who had previously dismissed her abilities now looked at her with newfound respect. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell approached as they completed their post-flight inspection. "Captain Santos, I just got off the radio with the ground commander whose soldiers you saved. He said your shooting was the most precise air support he's ever seen. I'm putting you in for a distinguished flying cross." Maria felt a surge of pride, but kept her expression professional. "Thank you, sir. I just did my job." "No, you did much more than your job. You proved that skill and courage are what matter in combat, not gender." That evening in the squadron ready room, the atmosphere had completely changed. Pilots who had previously ignored Maria now sought her opinions on tactics and target engagement. Hayes publicly stated that she was the best gunner he had ever flown with. But Maria knew that her biggest test was still ahead. Intelligence reports indicated that a major enemy offensive was being planned, involving coordinated attacks by hundreds of insurgent fighters supported by advanced weapon systems. When that battle came, she would need every skill she possessed to survive and protect the soldiers counting on her support. She had proven herself capable under fire, but the war was about to escalate to a level that would test the limits of her abilities. Maria spent the evening studying intelligence reports and planning for the challenges ahead, knowing that her next mission might be the most important of her entire career. The day hell came to Earth. October 23rd began with an intelligence briefing that sent shockwaves through Forward Operating Base Thunder. Enemy forces had coordinated the largest offensive operation scene in the Iraq theater, with over 200 insurgent fighters supported by captured Iraqi military equipment moving toward coalition positions. "This isn't the usual hit-and-run tactics we've been dealing with," Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell explained to the assembled pilots. "Intelligence indicates they've got at least 30 captured tanks, multiple armored personnel carriers, and sophisticated anti-aircraft systems. They're planning a conventional assault designed to overrun our forward positions." Maria studied the tactical display showing enemy movement patterns. Red arrows indicated multiple enemy columns converging on Coalition Forward Operating Base Delta, a strategically critical position that controlled the main supply route between Baghdad and northern Iraq. "Base Delta has only 200 defenders," Mitchell continued. "If it falls, we lose our primary supply line and leave thousands of coalition troops vulnerable to being cut off and surrounded. Hayes leaned forward in his chair. "Sir, what's our air support package for the defensive operation?" "Every available Apache in the theater. That's 8 aircraft total. We're also getting support from Air Force A-10s and F-16s, but the enemy air defense systems will limit their effectiveness at low altitude." Maria realized the magnitude of what they were facing. 8 Apache helicopters against 30 enemy tanks supported by professional military forces. The odds were overwhelming, but the mission was absolutely critical. "Flight assignments," Mitchell announced. "All aircraft will operate in pairs except Apache 2 to 7. Captain Santos and Chief Hayes will conduct independent operations against high-value targets." After the briefing, Hayes pulled Maria aside. "Santos, they're giving us the most dangerous assignment because they know we can handle it. Independent operations means we'll be working alone against the heaviest enemy concentrations." "What's our specific mission?" Maria asked. "Tank hunting. Intelligence believes the enemy has concentrated their armored vehicles in 3 locations. Our job is to find and destroy as many tanks as possible before they can reach Base Delta." Maria nodded grimly. Tank hunting was the most dangerous mission an Apache crew could fly. Enemy tanks were specifically designed to destroy aircraft, and their crews would be expecting helicopter attacks. Success would require perfect coordination, flawless tactics, and more than a little luck. 3 hours later, they were airborne in the pre-dawn darkness, flying toward the sound of distant artillery fire. The enemy offensive had begun, and radio reports indicated that coalition forces were already under heavy pressure. "Apache 2 to 7, this is Base Delta," came an urgent voice over their radio. "We have enemy armor columns approaching from the southeast. Request immediate support." "Base Delta, Apache 2 to 7, Hayes responded. "We're 15 minutes out. Can you give us updated enemy positions?" "Confirmed enemy tank column at grid 3247. Count shows at least 12 tanks with infantry support advancing toward our perimeter." Maria activated her targeting systems, scanning the desert terrain ahead for signs of enemy movement. Through her thermal imaging camera, she could see dust clouds and heat signatures that indicated a large mechanized force moving across the landscape. "Contact," she reported. "Multiple armored vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and what looks like at least 15 tanks in column formation." Hayes maneuvered the Apache into an attack position, using a ridgeline for concealment while Maria prepared to engage the enemy column. The tanks were Soviet-era T-72s, heavy battle tanks with thick armor and powerful cannons capable of destroying a helicopter with a single hit. "Beginning attack run," Maria announced, locking her first Hellfire missile onto the lead tank. The missile streaked away with a trail of white smoke, impacting the T-72 with devastating effect. The tank's ammunition detonated in secondary explosions that sent flames hundreds of feet into the air. But Maria was already engaging the second tank, then the third, her missiles finding their targets with precision accuracy. "Excellent shooting," Hayes called out as Maria destroyed her fourth tank in less than 2 minutes. But the enemy column was firing back now, their anti-aircraft systems tracking the Apache's position. Tracer rounds streaked past their aircraft, while surface-to-air missiles rose from concealed positions. "Sam's inbound," Maria shouted, deploying countermeasures while continuing to engage enemy targets. Hayes threw the Apache into violent evasive maneuvers, using terrain features to break missile tracking locks while Maria maintained her devastating attack on the tank column. Her shooting was absolutely perfect. Every missile hit its target. Every cannon burst found its mark. Within 10 minutes, Maria had destroyed 12 enemy tanks and 3 armored personnel carriers, completely stopping the first enemy column's advance toward Base Delta. But their radio immediately crackled with another urgent request. "Apache 2 to 7, this is Overlord. We have a second enemy armor column approaching from the north. 15 tanks, moving fast toward coalition positions." "Overlord, Apache 2 to 7, Hayes responded. "We're moving to intercept." They raced across the desert at maximum speed, their Apache pushing the limits of its performance as they rushed to engage the second enemy column. Maria used the flight time to reload their weapons systems and study intelligence updates on enemy positions. The second tank column was larger and better organized than the first. Intelligence indicated that these were experienced tank crews with training in anti-helicopter tactics. They would not be surprised by the Apaches' attack. Target area in sight, Maria reported as they approached the enemy position. Count shows 16 tanks in defensive formation with significant air defense coverage. This time the enemy was ready for them. Surface-to-air missiles began launching immediately as the Apache appeared, forcing Hayes into continuous evasive maneuvers while Maria tried to engage targets through the defensive fire. "They're good," Hayes said grimly as another missile detonated close enough to rattle their aircraft. "These crews know what they're doing." Maria studied the enemy formation through her targeting camera, looking for weaknesses in their defensive setup. The tanks were positioned to provide mutual support, with air defense systems placed to create overlapping coverage that would be almost impossible to penetrate. "Hayes, I need you to get me behind that ridgeline to the east," she said. "I think I can flank their air defense positions." Hayes immediately understood her plan. By approaching from an unexpected angle, they could attack the air defense systems before engaging the main tank formation. It was a risky maneuver that would expose them to fire from the entire enemy column. "Here we go," Hayes said, turning the Apache toward the ridgeline. They popped up behind the enemy formation, and Maria immediately opened fire on the air defense vehicles. Her cannon rounds tore through the lightly armored systems with devastating effect, destroying 3 missile launchers in rapid succession. With their air defense suppressed, Maria turned her attention to the main tank formation. Her Hellfire missiles began finding their targets with mechanical precision. One tank destroyed, then another, then another. Each missile impact sent flames and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. But the enemy tank crews were fighting back with desperate determination. Their main guns tracked the Apache's position while machine gunners filled the air with tracer fire. Maria could hear bullets striking their armored cockpit as she continued her methodical destruction of the enemy column. "Taking hits," Hayes reported calmly, "but we're still mission-capable." Maria's shooting was absolutely flawless. In 12 minutes of intense combat, she destroyed 14 enemy tanks and 6 support vehicles, completely eliminating the second enemy column as an effective fighting force. "Apache 2-7, this is Base Delta," came an excited voice over their radio. "Outstanding work. The enemy columns you engaged have been completely destroyed." But their radio immediately carried a third urgent message. "Apache 2-7, this is Overlord. We have reports of a third enemy column, 20-plus tanks, approaching from the southwest. This appears to be their main assault force." Maria checked their weapon status. They were down to their last 4 Hellfire missiles and less than half their cannon ammunition. Against 20 enemy tanks, their remaining weapons would not be sufficient for a conventional attack. "Hayes, we don't have enough ammunition for a standard engagement," she said. "Then we'll have to be creative," Hayes replied grimly. As they approached the third enemy column, Maria could see that this was indeed the enemy's main force. 21 T-72 tanks were advancing in a coordinated formation supported by air defense systems, infantry, fighting vehicles, and hundreds of foot soldiers. "That's a lot of targets for 4 missiles," Hayes observed. Maria studied the enemy formation through her targeting camera, looking for the most effective way to use their limited ammunition. The enemy tanks were carrying external fuel and ammunition that could create massive secondary explosions if hit precisely. "I'm going to target their ammunition carriers and fuel trucks," she said. "If I can create secondary explosions, they might take out multiple tanks with each missile." It was an incredibly difficult shot that required perfect timing and accuracy. Maria would have to hit precisely the right point on each target to cause the secondary explosions that could destroy nearby vehicles. "Beginning final attack run," she announced. Her first Hellfire missile struck an ammunition truck positioned between 3 tanks. The resulting explosion was enormous, destroying not only the truck but all three nearby tanks in a massive fireball that could be seen for miles. The second missile hit a fuel depot, creating another devastating explosion that eliminated two more tanks and an infantry fighting vehicle. Maria's third missile found another ammunition carrier, destroying four additional enemy vehicles in the secondary blast. With one missile remaining, Maria identified the enemy command tank, a modified T-72 with additional communication equipment that was coordinating the entire assault. Her final Hellfire missile struck it perfectly, eliminating the enemy's command and control capabilities. But Maria wasn't finished. With her remaining cannon ammunition, she systematically engaged the surviving enemy vehicles, her shooting absolutely perfect despite the intense return fire. Each burst found its target, destroying or disabling enemy tanks with precision that left even Hayes amazed. "Incredible shooting, Santos," he said as Maria eliminated the last functional enemy tank. "I've never seen anything like it." When the smoke cleared, Maria had single-handedly destroyed or disabled all 21 enemy tanks in the main assault force. Combined with her earlier engagements, she had eliminated 47 enemy tanks in one day, a record that had never been achieved by any pilot in military history. "Apache 2-7, this is Overlord," came a voice filled with awe over their radio. "Confirm your engagement results. Intelligence shows complete destruction of all three enemy armor columns." "Overlord, Apache 2-7, Hayes responded. "All enemy armor neutralized. Returning to base for rearming." As they flew back toward forward operating base Thunder, Maria reflected on what they had accomplished. The enemy offensive had been completely defeated, saving thousands of coalition lives and preserving the critical supply route through Base Delta. But, more importantly, she had proven beyond any doubt that gender was irrelevant when it came to combat effectiveness. Her shooting had been absolutely perfect under the most challenging conditions imaginable, and her tactical decisions had been flawless throughout the engagement. When they landed at the base, a crowd of pilots and ground crew had gathered to meet them. Word of Maria's incredible performance had spread throughout the entire theater of operations, and her name was already being mentioned alongside the greatest combat pilots in military history. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell approached with tears in his eyes. "Captain Santos, what you accomplished today will be remembered as one of the greatest individual combat achievements in military aviation history. You saved thousands of lives and proved that courage and skill know no gender." Maria looked around at the faces of her fellow pilots. Men who had initially doubted her abilities now regarded her with genuine respect and admiration. She had not only proven herself worthy of their brotherhood, but had established herself as one of the most capable combat pilots any of them had ever seen. The girl who had dreamed of flying death machines had become a legend. #Legacy of a Warrior. The news of Captain Maria Santos's incredible feat spread through military channels like wildfire. Within hours of her return to base, reports of her single-day destruction of 47 enemy tanks had reached the Pentagon, NATO headquarters, and news organizations around the world. The story of a female Apache pilot achieving what many considered impossible became an international sensation. Maria found the sudden attention overwhelming. Military journalists arrived at forward operating base Thunder requesting interviews, while photographers documented every detail of her daily routine. The Apache she flew was examined by weapons analysts who could barely believe that one aircraft had accomplished so much destruction in a single day. "Santos, you've become a celebrity," Hayes said as they walked past another group of reporters trying to get her attention. "How does it feel to be famous?" "Uncomfortable," Maria replied honestly. "I just did my job. Every pilot in this squadron would have done the same thing in my position." "No, they wouldn't have," Hayes said seriously. "I've been flying combat missions for 8 years, and I've never seen shooting like yours. What you did wasn't just skilled, it was extraordinary." The broader implications of Maria's achievement extended far beyond her individual success. Military leaders around the world began reconsidering their policies regarding women in combat roles. If one female pilot could achieve such remarkable results under the most challenging conditions, what did that say about artificial barriers that had prevented women from serving in similar positions? General Patricia Williams, the highest-ranking female officer in the Army, flew to Iraq specifically to meet with Maria. Their conversation took place in a quiet corner of the base chapel, away from the constant media attention. "Captain Santos, I want you to understand what your achievement means for every woman who has ever dreamed of serving in combat," General Williams said. "You've proven that excellence has no gender, and your example will open doors for thousands of young women who want to serve their country." Maria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Ma'am, I never set out to prove anything about women in combat. I just wanted to be a good pilot." "Sometimes the most powerful statements are made by people who aren't trying to make statements at all," Williams replied. "Your actions spoke louder than any political argument or policy debate ever could." The conversation turned to Maria's future career options. Her record-setting performance had made her one of the most sought-after pilots in the military, with opportunities ranging from test pilot programs to instructor positions at the most prestigious aviation schools. "You could have any assignment you want," Williams explained. "The Pentagon is prepared to offer you positions that would normally take decades to achieve. You've earned the right to write your own career path." Maria considered the general's words carefully. Part of her was tempted by the opportunities being offered, test piloting cutting-edge aircraft, training the next generation of combat pilots, or working on advanced weapons development programs. But another part of her felt that her mission in Iraq was unfinished. "General, with respect, I'd like to complete my deployment here. My squadron still has work to do, and I don't want to abandon my responsibilities." Williams smiled. "I expected you might say that. It's exactly the kind of response that makes you the exceptional officer you are." Over the following weeks, Maria continued flying combat missions with the same professionalism and skill that had always characterized her performance. But the dynamics within the squadron had completely changed. Pilots who had once questioned her presence now sought her advice on tactics and target engagement. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell began assigning her the most challenging missions, knowing that her capabilities exceeded those of any other pilot under his command. Maria consistently delivered outstanding results, whether conducting precision strikes against high-value targets or providing close air support to embattled ground forces. One evening, as Maria was reviewing intelligence reports for the next day's missions, Hayes approached her with an unusual expression. "Santos, I owe you an apology," he said, sitting down across from her. "When you first arrived, I was convinced that having a female pilot would compromise our unit's effectiveness. I was wrong about everything." Maria looked up from her paperwork. "You don't owe me an apology. You were protecting soldiers' lives based on your experience and training. I had to prove myself just like any new pilot would." "No, it was more than that," Hayes insisted. "I had preconceived notions about what women could and couldn't do in combat. You didn't just prove me wrong. You completely changed my understanding of what's possible." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert over the base's communication system. Intelligence had identified a high-value target, a senior insurgent leader responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. "All available Apache crews to the briefing room immediately," came the announcement. The intelligence briefing revealed that the target was located in a heavily defended compound surrounded by multiple air defense systems and protected by an estimated 60 fighters with military training. Previous attempts to capture or eliminate the target had failed due to the sophisticated defensive preparations. "This is a volunteer mission only," Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell explained. "The risk level is extreme, and success is not guaranteed. The target is too important to ignore, but I won't order anyone to fly this mission." Every pilot in the room immediately volunteered, but Maria spoke first. "Sir, request permission to lead the mission. My aircraft has the best recent performance record, and I'm familiar with the target area from previous operations." Mitchell nodded. "Apache 2 to 7 will be lead aircraft. Select your supporting elements." Maria chose 2 other Apache crews to accompany her mission, pilots whose skills and judgment she had observed during previous operations. The mission planning took 4 hours, with every detail scrutinized and contingency plans developed for multiple scenarios. The target compound was located in a mountainous region 40 miles from a base, surrounded by terrain that provided natural defensive positions for enemy forces. Intelligence indicated that the insurgent leader was meeting with foreign fighters to plan a major terrorist operation against civilian targets. Maria launched her mission in the pre-dawn darkness, leading 3 Apache helicopters through hostile territory toward one of the most dangerous targets they had ever attempted to engage. The enemy compound was surrounded by surface-to-air missile systems and protected by fighters who had been specifically trained to counter helicopter attacks. As they approached the target area, Maria's threat warning systems detected multiple enemy radar systems attempting to track their approach. The insurgent forces had sophisticated equipment and knew how to use it effectively. "Lead, this is Apache 2-3, came a voice over the radio. "I'm showing multiple SAM sites active around the target compound." "Confirmed," Maria replied. "Stick to the planned approach route. We'll suppress the air defenses before moving against the primary target." The mission unfolded with clockwork precision. Maria's tactical planning proved flawless as her team systematically eliminated the enemy air defense systems before turning their attention to the main compound. Her shooting was as accurate as ever, destroying specific buildings while avoiding civilian areas nearby. The insurgent leader was killed in the precisely targeted attack, along with several foreign fighters who had been planning terrorist operations. Intelligence gathered from the destroyed compound prevented multiple attacks against coalition forces and civilian targets. As they returned to base, Maria reflected on how much had changed since her arrival in Iraq. She had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to combat effectiveness. But, more importantly, she had helped save countless lives through her exceptional performance as a combat pilot. When her deployment ended 6 months later, Maria had flown over 100 combat missions and had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Silver Star, and numerous other decorations for her exceptional service. But the awards meant less to her than the respect she had earned from fellow pilots and the lives she had helped save. At her farewell ceremony, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell presented her with a unique honor, the squadron patch worn by every pilot who had served with distinction in their unit. "Captain Santos, you arrived here as an unproven pilot facing skepticism about your abilities," he said. "You leave as one of the most respected combat aviators in military history. Every pilot who serves in this squadron after you will know that excellence is measured by skill and courage, not by gender." Maria's legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements. Military policies regarding women in combat roles were revised based partly on her demonstrated capabilities. Training programs were modified to focus on performance rather than gender-based assumptions. Thousands of young women found new opportunities to serve their country in roles that had previously been closed to them. Years later, as Maria continued her military career as a test pilot and instructor, she would often be asked about her record-setting day in Iraq. Her response was always the same. She had simply done her job to the best of her abilities, just as she expected any professional pilot would do. But the impact of her service went far beyond professional duty. Maria Santos had proven that human potential should never be limited by arbitrary barriers, and that courage and skill could overcome any obstacle. Her story became an inspiration to anyone who had ever been told that their dreams were impossible because of who they were rather than what they could achieve. The girl who had dreamed of flying death machines had become something more, a symbol of what was possible when talent and determination were given the opportunity to flourish. Her legacy lived on in every woman who chose to pursue dreams that others said were impossible, and in every barrier that was removed because someone had proven that excellence knew no boundaries. In the end, Maria Santos had done more than destroy 47 enemy tanks in a single day. She had destroyed the myth that women couldn't perform at the highest levels of military combat, opening doors for future generations and proving that the only limits that truly matter are the ones we place on ourselves.